Welcome to What's New in version 19 AL, the Hacker Edition. Hey, I'm Eric, and it's kind of become a tradition that every time Microsoft releases a new version of Business Central, I'll do a video on what's new in development, what's new in AL, what's new under the hood. Peek behind the glossy surface and see is there anything interesting. So if you already seen one of those, great. That probably because you are a subscriber to the channel, and I thank you for that. If not, maybe become a subscriber. Anyway, this is potentially a long list, so let's get right to it. I want to start on a web page. I want to start right here on the what is planned, because that kind of gives us a quick overview of what to look for. And the very first thing on the list says generated documentation for AL language, and maybe that's have been inspired by previous videos, because basically what Microsoft is saying that now whenever they add something to the language, they will add documentation, or at least some sort of documentation, and then they were gonna improve it. So maybe videos like this are actually not needed, but we'll do this one anyway. Let's see how it goes. The next thing on the list is a AL profiler, and a profiler is a piece of, it's not really telemetry, that's the wrong word, but it's a way to see how long specific pieces of your code has taken to run. So it's a great way to measure where are your bottlenecks and where can you improve performance and so on. It's like an extension to the snapshot debuggers. So I think we're gonna do one or two dedicated videos on that without looking into it now. Transactional installation and sync of extension on premises. It's basically so that if you have multiple apps that are upgrading, you can have them upgrade within the same transaction. So either all apps are upgraded or they're not upgraded as a PowerShell thing on-prem. I'm not going to look into that. I hope somebody else are. I am in the cloud. Hey. Next one is not really AL at all. It's just that the good old invoice post buffer table is totally getting refactored. So the way of controlling the aggregation of sales posting is changing. I think that's also deserves a separate video at some point. Then we have something called richer access control for extension source in cloud environments. And the idea is that we used to have, let me switch over really quick. Oh, wrong screen, here it is. In app.json, we used to have something called show my code, true or false, that's it. That has been replaced now with this whole guy, resource exposure policy. And you know, whenever Microsoft uses the word policy, it's gonna be heavy. I kind of like the show my code. Yes, no, that's funky. That's new. That's on the beat. Resource exposure policy. The next thing is that we need a resource exposure group policy, and then it's all downhill from that point on. But anyway. Allow debugging, allow downloading source, includes source in symbol file. So we have the options to really fine tune how other developers are consuming our app. Do we allow them to debug our app? Do we allow them to download the source, the three dots, so show my code, the primary functionality in that one? And do we include source code in the symbols file? So when we're downloading symbols to the AL packages, will these include source code or just the actual symbol definition? Pretty cool. Let's quickly go back to the list. Then we got a couple of, this is not really the language, componentization of the image module and Azure Blob Service REST API. So I think all that goes into the system application and makes it possible to, resize an image, crop images, and communicate with Azure blobs. Change publisher or extension name. Well, if you misspelled your publisher name, then you were kind of stuck with it because the primary key was ID publisher name. But now we can change that. That's pretty cool also. Here's a big one: collectible arrows in AL. And I've been trying to wrap my head around this. So the idea is that your code can throw more than one arrow. And I think this is very interesting because, some years ago, I'm not going to put a number on, but some years ago, Microsoft wasn't really that interested in helping us figuring out what went wrong, if something went wrong. They wrote stuff in the event log and that was kind of it. But then it happened that, get to the cloud and Microsoft were hosting their own application. And since they started hosting their own application, we've seen tremendous work on telemetry and arrow handling and all that stuff, because now they're in our shoes. Now they are actually the one getting the weird arrows and have to deal with crazy scenarios that comes up. So lots of improvements have over the last couple of years has gone into helping the system admin of a Business Central installation, and this is, I see this as just another extra tool in the toolbox. I think we'll check it out a bit later in this video, but that's probably also kind of its own videos material. Error dialogues with detailed error message for better troubleshooting. Same deal, right? So force sync of customer specific extension in online environments. Again, not really anything to do with AL, but sometimes you got a force sync, and right now the only way you can get a force sync on Business Central in the cloud is to call up support and have them do it. But now we will be able to do that ourselves. Pretty cool. Now there's two more, and this one seems quite exciting. So one called performance support for included columns and keys, and that's just a kind of it's almost a one-liner here, but the idea is that when SQL is looking for something and using a index to find it, there might not be, let me start over. So when SQL uses an index, it uses the index to look, and then it goes from the index and go back to the data file to get all the columns it needs. Now that we have support for partial records, then you say we only need these 4 fields. If 2 of those fields are already in the index, then we now have the option with included columns to ask SQL Server to store those other 2 columns in the index. So SQL only needs to access the index in order to get the data. So we are I don't know what the performance gain here is, but in my mind, we're going in, if we can stay within the index instead of using the index and something else, it's a twofold performance improvement, because now you can just stay in the index, you don't have to touch the data file at all. So for very, very specific scenarios, I think this will be really, really cool. But it requires the partial record, because if we otherwise ask AL to get all fields anyway, then it doesn't really matter. But in those specific scenarios where we can narrow our queries into very specific fields, and they make sense to add some extra fields into the index, then this could be pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to trying that out. The next one is kind of, again, this has nothing to do with AL, but it kind of has to do with development anyway. So I get the idea here. The next one, I have not yet completely wrapped my head around. So using a non-clustered column store index instead of CIF indexes can have multiple performance benefits, such as reducing locking due to maintenance of CIF index, which are index used anyway, faster posting, reduced storage costs, blah blah blah. So as the way I understand this, we have a different way of storing the data needed to calculate a sum field. And the idea with the non-clustered store index is that it's stored differently in SQL than a normal index. And I think Kenny and company, Kenny and Jens and all those great guys from the server team are going to detail this in details. So I'm not even going to try at this point, but I think I can see some clear benefits, especially the first one, and probably also this one, depending on what type of sums we're looking for. I love the message here at the bottom of the screen. Let me see if we can make it so you guys can see that instead of it's behind my big head here. Using NCCIs can give you better performance, especially in situations where developers forget to add one or more SIFT indexes. Fantastic. And the last one is more of a help for us than for anybody else. That when you get an error message in the compiler, you get a URL to fantastic documentation about how to resolve that. But that is not yet, and I think this is. And actually, let me make sure that no, everything else is October, yeah. So this one is December. So that gives me an opportunity just to clarify what Microsoft means by wave 1 and wave 2. What they mean is that now we're entering wave number 2. Microsoft upped the version number, but it does not mean that everything is released now. Just mean that we are starting the new wave, and then the wave is the next 6 months. Till April next year, where we get 2022 wave 1. So some of these things are here now, and like in this case, this is not here yet, but we'll look forward to it. Anyway, on to the next part of this. So what I have done before I started the new video was I decompile the language analysis DLL, because the great thing is that, you know, when we have something here and we specify runtime, so this field controls how the compiler behaves. So if I tell this to be runtime 2.0, then I tell the compiler to be able to compile version 15. Or is it? I can't even remember anymore. Anyway, so we can see suddenly stuff that used to work does not work. So if we do this for version 18, so we said 7, well, we allowed the ID ranges, but we're not allowed for the new things here. But we can now do show my code. True. I think it doesn't need to be. Maybe it's mad at me now. Anyway, so but if we do version 8, they go away. So everything inside the compiler is tagged with a version. And what we can do is simply we can search for that. So let's say that we looked at what was in 7. So this was what I did in the last video. I searched for 7, and there was a bunch of stuff that were tagged with version compatibility. I can't even say that. Version 7, and we can do a mental check and see what happens after version 7. Well, something was not released until 7.1. Nothing I was gonna say, but there's actually something that was deprecated in 7.2, and then we got so that is something about 7.2. We got application inside connection string instead of applications inside key. And we can do a quick check. Anything in 7.3? No. 7.4, 7.5, and here we are. So now we are at 8, and we got a list. It's not that long, but we got a list nonetheless. So let's actually check what they put in to version 8 or version 19 and see if it matches what we just read. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So the first thing here is an attribute called error behavior, meaning that if we create a procedure test here, we can go in and say attribute called error behavior, and then takes a parameter called error behavior collect, and now we're collecting error. So the idea of what was it? The idea of being able to throw more than one error and collect that information is done, at least through some of it is done through this attribute, setting this attribute. So that is new on the attributes. The next one is the object parser, and this is stuff on, you can see this is stuff on keys. So we got included fields. So that was the included fields. We got a column store index. So the two things that are mentioned, both the included key and the column store index, are in the compiler. Excellent. Then we can see that the next one is the app manifesto. So show my code has been deprecated in version 8, and we got the new resource policy, allow debugging, allow downloading, include source. So that's all good. Now we go into the error behavior. So that was what we already saw. And now we have the error info class. So this is a new one. We can see that there's lots of parameters. So if I go in here and then I create a variable error, I can create a variable that's an error info. And then I can say error equal error info dot create. And I think I need to give it a name. What about error? And then I can also actually overload this. That was what we saw. What we saw here. Sorry, what we're seeing here are all the functions that are on error now. So if I go and do error dot, I can get a call stack. I can say that it's collecting. I can add a control name. I can add some custom dimensions. So if you played with telemetry, you know that in custom dimensions are where all the good stuff are located. classification, data classification, detail, error message, error type, field number, message, page number, different things here. So a way to record error information, and at some point I need to figure out how to do this in a good example, and I'll do a video about that. So that's error info, there's lots of that. That's still error info. Then we got on HTTP headers, we got something new here. We got get values, so I think that's an overload. Let's try that for a second here. We can go over here. Whoops. Headers with an A, HTTP headers. So I think we get values, and we can get the keys. Values we had already, but I think that's an overload here now that will return a list of text. Looks that way. So this is, yeah, that's a new one. That's the new one. So there's an overload there. The headers, we didn't see anything in the documentation about that one. And the other one is the key. So we can get all the keys as a, what are keys? Will give us a list of text of all the keys. Then in system class, we can do hey. So there's some new functions here. See, let's go, yeah. See, there's a new function called get collected arrows, clear collected arrows, and has collected arrows. So we can do something with them. So that's new also. And it looks like the last one is on variant. Good old variant. It looks like, let's just mark those. This is line 63 and 64. So I guess is data classification type, is data classification type has been deprecated, use the is data classification instead. So a small deprecation there, and I think that's it. That's all she wrote. All they wrote, I guess. Kind of from a language thing and so on, a lackluster list. Not much has happened, but I think this actually speaks to the maturity of the platform, of the compiler, of the development environment, that this is actually we don't need a million new things, because what we have is pretty good. It also, looking at the small changes from 18 to 19, really shows that unless you're truly using data classification on variants, some I'm not even sure how to do that at this point. I don't think you can write a version 18 program that will not work in 19 after you change the show my code thing in app.json. So that's a pretty easy upgrade. Anyway, that's the list. Let me know in the comments below if you have discovered something I missed. Let me know in the comments below what of all these things you really want me to do videos on. And remember that there is an event coming up. I don't even know the date. I should really have looked that up. So there's an event where Microsoft are doing the usual song and dance show of all these things, and I'm gonna watch that, of course, because awesome. And until next time, have a wonderful day, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.